Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my most favourite investors I like to follow out of the US, and that is Mohnish Pabrai. I've talked about him a couple of times on the channel before. I did another video on the Dhandho Investor, which is his book that he wrote. Highly recommend his book and also his YouTube channel. Provides a lot of great content, especially if you have a value investing sort of style to your investing strategy, which is the style that I have now changed and shifted into more of a value investing strategy when it comes to investing in the equity markets. But not just in the equity markets as well, more into property and everything as well. I'm always looking for these undervalued assets that I can buy at below their intrinsic value, or that I get a good sort of margin of safety. And that's essentially what Warren Buffett and Mohnish Pabrai and Seth Klarman and all these other sort of big value investors, this is the same sort of approach they take. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the latest video from Mohnish Pabrai, where he has a chat to Clemson University, which is his old stomping ground. This is where he went to uni back in about 30 odd years ago, where he studied computing, I think, from memory. So it was a great sort of Q&A session, and there's some really key points taken away from this video, or that I took away from the video, but I highly recommend you go over and check out the original video as well. But in this video, we're just going to be sort of taking away my sort of key takeaways from this video. He started off, talking about his old uni days and how it was all good fun and times at uni, as it tends to be. And then they started asking about shorting stocks, okay? Mohnish is very staunch on this, his thoughts and opinion, and so am I. He doesn't short any stocks, and to this day, till the day he dies, he thinks he will never short a stock. And especially at the last few weeks, we can see how much that can get yourself into trouble when you're heavily shorting a stock, and then all of a sudden the stock price just goes through the roof, which we've seen recently with Gamestop making all the news with Wall Street bets and all that sort of it. I'm sure you've watched a couple of videos around it, so I'm not going to be talking about that too much. But that's his stance on shorting stocks. He doesn't do it, and neither do I. I don't short stocks. I don't muck around with it. I'm not good enough to try and predict the short-term movements of stocks or anything like that, so I don't even really touch it. I do find it interesting to look at what companies are heavily shorted, especially here in Australia and New Zealand. Look at see what the latest and what everyone's sort of shorting. And also, it's been quite interesting to watch from the sidelines all this Gamestop and BlackBerry and all these other sort of companies and all the heavily shorted interest from the hedge funds, and then the little guys coming back and having a crack at it, which I love. I like that story, the underdogs coming through. So that was his stance on shorting stocks. He then touched on ethical investing, which is quite a lot of traction at the moment. Everyone's keen to invest ethically, which I think is great. Good to put pressure on these big companies and organisations to do things in an ethical manner. And Mohnish hadn't really talked about this much before. If he has, I've never sort of heard of it. And his stance was, look, he's definitely, put some stock into it. And like he says, he wouldn't invest into a tobacco company or something like that, or even sort of gambling companies. But he's still not opposed to investing into, carbon emitting companies like oil and gas companies and these sort of companies as well. And I'm sort of in the same boat myself. I do work in the oil and gas industry, and we still need oil and gas as well. This is my stance on it. It's quite a controversial topic. There's a big shift to EV at the moment, which is also great, but I still think there's still another good sort of 5-10 years worth of oil before we sort of can phase away from oil. We still haven't got ways to fly around the world yet without the need for oil. But anyway, that's just my stance on oil as well, and that's the same sort of stance as where sort of Mohnish sort of sits with it as well. So I thought that was quite interesting. He also got asked, which he generally gets asked this question a fair bit, was, what's his stance, or what's the market going to do? Which everyone always wants to know, what's the market going to do next year or this year or whatever. And he says, look, he's not smart enough to try and predict the short-term movements of the market, and I'm in the same boat. Look, I don't follow any of that sort of environment, what the Fed's doing or what your local governments or councils or anything are doing, or particular things that's happening out there in the world. It's very hard to try and forecast and predict short-term movements in the market. Well, I find it is, and I don't really spend much time at all sort of focusing on that. I sort of go with more the looking at particular companies and sort of getting a deeper understanding of the company, and then just investing with that company rather than trying to predict or forecast what's going to happen in the outer world. It's very hard to forecast that, just like we saw last year with the correction in the market with the pandemic. No one would have saw that coming, sort of thing. So it's a perfect example of that. Things can come out of right field, which you're not ready for. So that was his stance on that. Look, he has no idea. He doesn't even try to pretend like he knows where the market's going in the short term. It is looking overly valued at the moment, the entire market as a whole. There's potential bubbles he talked about in certain companies and things, and all the shorting interest as well, which is creating a few different things in the market. So that was his stance on that. He talked on his latest investment he has in Turkey that he made in 2019, which was quite interesting. I'm not going to go into it too much detail. Like I said, I highly recommend you go over and check out the actual original video of all this, where he goes into a bit more detail about this particular investment, how he actually went to Turkey and chatted to management and all that sort of thing, which was very interesting. Good to listen to that side of it as well. Even when there were things going on in the macro environment, like we touched on, things that he can't forecast. The lira, which is the currency there in Turkey, was getting devalued at the time, but I think that particular investment he made is about 6 or 7x from when he invested in 2019. So he's had a great run with that. I myself, I've never invested in any companies in Turkey, but I do like to follow what Mohnish is doing and try and analyse his investments and things, and try and learn what I can from how he's in investing. He has made some incredible investments over his investing life here. And he follows that same sort of strategy that Warren Buffett and all these other big value investors I like to follow as well. And he just seems like such a nice guy. I've never met him or anything, but you can see from the videos and from his writings and everything, he just seems like such a nice chap. So that's my sort of take on old Mohnish. But you know, you be the judge. Go over, check out some of his videos, or definitely highly recommend his book, like I've said a few times as well. So that was his latest investment. They also got his thoughts on Bitcoin, okay? Everyone loves talking about Bitcoin at the moment because prices have been pumping. It's funny, you know, March last year when prices around that $5,000-$6,000 for one Bitcoin, no one was talking about it. Now it's up around the $30,000-$40,000 for one Bitcoin. Everyone's jumping on it, sort of thing. So his thoughts on Bitcoin, he had the same sort of take on it that I do as well. He doesn't know enough about it to invest in it, and even if he did, he said, I still don't know enough to make a call whether he'd buy some or not buy any. And I'm in the same sort of boat. Like, I have a basic understanding of it, and it's hard to put in a value on Bitcoin as well, and I'm in the same sort of boat as well. Very hard to put a value on something that's sort of so, you know, violent in its fluctuations in price and that sort of thing. So that's where his sort of stance was that on Bitcoin. He says he's not something that he's looking at investing. It's something that interests him, and I'm in the same boat. I find it interesting to watch, but I'm not stumping up any of my own hard dollars to put into it at this stage, and I probably won't unless something changes. It's interesting that the hedge funds and everything are starting to get on it now, so I've been following that a little bit as well. I've got a few friends that are very bullish on it, just the whole crypto space in general, who do have a pretty good understanding, so I sometimes shoot the odd question to them, something I'm not too savvy with, or like I said, I don't pretend like I know much about Bitcoin. I do have a basic understanding of how it works and the blockchain and all that as well, but that's his sort of stance on it as well. So it's cool to hear that as well, especially at the moment in this Bitcoin craze and crypto and Ethereum and all these other sort of cryptos that everyone's sort of getting in on. It was great to hear his sort of stance on that. And then lastly, this is one of the key takeaways from the whole video for me, was how he's changing his investing strategy. Okay, he's famous for buying these dollar companies, and then they were going for 50 cents sort of thing. That's his sort of cliche sort of catchphrase that he'd always be going with, buying dollar bills for 50 cents sort of thing, buying companies at 50% below their intrinsic value or even more. So and then when it makes its way back up to intrinsic value or close to intrinsic value, then they sell them on and then put those funds back into something else again. So that's what he's sort of been famous for investing style. Same as Warren Buffett in his early days. Now he's sort of shifting from that more to a set and forget sort of strategy, just investing into great companies with good runway ahead of them and just sitting on their hands and doing nothing. And he talks about an investor called Nick Sleeps, who's someone I haven't really heard about too much before, but he has a whole heap of letters which I've just recently downloaded, which I'll leave a link in the description below to these letters, who has the same sort of strategy. So he invested in 3 companies. I'm not too sure of the exact year, but there's something I'm going to read over these letters over these next few weeks and probably make a video or two about it as well. And if you guys want to jump in and read the letters as well, I'll leave a link in the description, like I said, where this guy, Nick Sleeps, so he invested in Amazon, Costco, and Berkshire Hathaway. Like I said, I'm not too sure on the exact years that he did this, but let's say it was a good sort of 10, 20 years ago, let's say. Maybe more 20, sorry. And then for that space of time, basically sat on his hands, didn't do anything, and he outperformed, this is from Mohnish's stance here, he outperformed most money managers over that whole period. Just bought into these great companies at a good time and just sat on them. You know, he did his research, and then he wasn't actively buying and selling and trading and everything on a daily basis, which, you know, media and everything likes to hype up. Wall Street and everything, you got to be buying and selling on a split second, and you're on the phone, you're stressed out, sort of thing. This guy, he did his research on these particular companies, liked what he saw, he invested, and he wasn't afraid to go all on them. They had a high return on equity, good managers in place, owner occupiers, same sort of thing. Sorry. Where the owner's still the founder of the company, driving it forward, which is like Amazon. Even though Jeff Bezos did stand down the other day, Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway, obviously Warren Buffett's the main man behind that. So he brought into these great companies. In Costco, I don't know too much about Costco, but I have heard about it, watched a couple of videos on it, but I don't have much more of an understanding of Costco than that. But those were the top 3 that he went on, and basically sat on his hands and outperformed most other managers as well, which is a great way. And this is the way that I sort of want to hit with my investing as well. As I like to do a lot of things, I like to snowboard and mountain bike, and pretty active sort of a guy, and always got a few things on the go at the same time. I don't have time to, actively sit in front of a computer all day, and it's not that enjoyable either. I enjoy reading about companies and learning that sort of thing as well. But if I find a good investment, I'm not afraid to go all in on it as well. or not all in, but give it a good chunk of my capital at the time into that particular investment, which I've done in the past predominantly through real estate, and now I'm sort of branching more over towards the equity market side of things. It's a little bit more easier to sort of navigate now that I'm getting a better understanding of the equity markets, whereas in the past I had a better understanding of property, which I still have a pretty good understanding of property as well, but now sort of moving more to the equity market side of things slowly. I'm struggling to find good investments at the moment. As everything I'm looking at, the more I learn at the moment and understand about investing, the less I'm actually investing in, because I'm just struggling to find good value at the moment in the current market that we're all living through. Interesting times for sure. Anyway, that was the greatest sort of takeaways from the latest chat with Mohnish Pabrai. Like I said, I highly recommend you go over and check out the video on his channel. Well worth your time. I think it's about 45 minutes from memory, but you can slip it in while you're having your dinner, or doing other chores or anything. It's a great one just to listen to as well. You don't have to actually physically watch it or anything. There's nothing animated happening. His videos are very basic, but definitely highly recommend checking it out. If you got some value from today's video, guys, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that like button. Helps me out a ton, helps push these videos out a bit further. And if you want to watch future videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you'll be the first to know when the next video drops. If you enjoyed this video, guys, especially, talking about other investors that I like to follow, drop that in the comments as well, because this is probably something I'll keep following up on as Mohnish's over the next couple of years, investments he's going to be making, and be following his 13F filings just to see what he's been doing, and I'll be having a very keen interest on any companies that he's looking at investing in over the following years. So it's something I'll be sort of keeping tabs on, let's say. With that said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next video. Cheers, guys.